burning ring of fire. We didn't start the fire. While our beds are burning, burn for you. With all the fire. This house is on fire.
I've lived in the beautiful little suburb of Heathmont nearly all my life. I lived up on Canterbury Road when I was a little kid. And after we got married, about 3 or 4 houses in, we finished up building a house here on Waters Grove, just down on the dirt track over there. And diagonally opposite from where we live, you can see this beautiful house over here. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous house. It's been there for about 10 years now. But it didn't always used to be a gorgeous house. In fact, it didn't used to be this house. There used to be a timber house over there. It didn't look like it was really well looked after. The garden was never looked after. And we found out it was a rented house. And there were 4 guys that were living in there. And my son was probably around 16 years old at that time. And Samuel said to me one day, he said, "Dad, there's something dodgy going on in that house." And I said, "What makes you think that?" And he goes, "Because of that." And he points up and there's a pair of runners hanging over the power wire. And I thought, yeah, look, I've heard that before, Samuel. I think that's a bit of a wives' tale. And by the way, there's a school across the road. It's probably some kid playing a prank on his mate. He goes, "No, Dad, I reckon there's something going on in that place. I reckon it's a drug place." Anyway, let that go. And about 3 or 4 days later, it was a Saturday night and Florina and I were watching Collingwood versus Essendon on the TV. And in the second quarter, just after Collingwood had kicked their first goal, there was this and my first reaction was to grab my handy cam. These days I probably would have got my phone instead, but in those days it was a handy cam, and I just started to run. I ran out of the house, down the dirt track, and then straight away could see that the house that was here, not this house here, but the one that was made out of timber, was in a huge ball of fire, absolutely massive. So I ran across and I started screaming out in case there was somebody in there, but nobody responded. You couldn't get near the place, and I started to film. Before we knew it, we had people running all over the place, and then the cops arrived, and then you had fire engines all over the place. We had 6 units down here, and it took them a long time to put the fire out. One of the fire guys, when it was all over, said, "Do you know when this started?" And I said, "I know exactly when it started." He said, "When?" And I said, "If you go to Channel 7 and ask them when Collingwood kicked the first goal in the second quarter, what the time was, that was the exact time that this fire started." And he laughed a bit and he said, "Okay, we might actually do that." A little bit later on, after all the cleanup had happened, I was quite surprised that there was no news people here. I thought there would have been news people all over it, but there was not one. The fire engines eventually went away, and then the cops went away. They'd made all their reports, and I was just sitting here filming just the last bit of it. Suddenly this car comes screaming down the road here, and it's Channel 9. And the guy jumps out of his car and he goes, "Oh, I'm too late, am I?" I said, "Yeah, mate, you're way too late." He said, "Oh, I can't believe it. Oh, fancy missing footage of this." And I said, "I didn't." He said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "Nope, I filmed the whole lot." And he said, "Oh, can I use that?" I said, "Yeah, of course you can, mate." If you were watching the Channel 9 news that night, you saw footage of that house burning down that came directly from this camera right here. The other thing was too that the guy videoed me talking about the incident as well, so I finished up in that news thing as well. Samuel, turns out you were right.
I told you so, Dad.